Well, here at Canline, we're always interested in bits of research that get published, particularly when it pertains to marketing and the CMOs. McKinsey's been doing that over the last number of years. Well, this year it's about different types of CMO and how they really impact the business. I'm pleased to say Jason Heller and Biljana Cvetanovski from McKinsey join me. What is the upshot of this year's research?
So thanks, James. What you really need to know about what makes a successful CMO is that they can't do it on their own. So our research this year really helped us understand it truly takes a village. It takes going outside of the four walls of the marketing department for CMOs to be successful today.
Isn't that common sense, in the sense that we know that the CMO has to speak to the digital people, we know they have to speak to all sorts of groups within the business. Why is this particularly pertinent now?
So we found in our research there's only 24% of CMOs who are actually doing this interconnectivity and connection and collaboration with the rest of the organization and doing it well. And we found that CEOs are really giving a lot of runway to CMOs to actually take on more and more of the agenda. So it's really a small subset of CMOs who are doing this really, really well. And what we found is that in high growth companies, they're 7 times more likely to have this type of CMO. And we call the CMO the unifier.
What are the other two, and how either effective or ineffective are they, Jason?
So on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have what we call the loner, which is sort of what it sounds like. It's a CMO who's sort of isolated, doesn't have the full support of the C-suite. In fact, sometimes they're not even considered peers by the rest of the C-suite. But most CMOs actually fall into this archetype we call a friend, and the friend maybe has 1 or 2 C-suite relationships, typically with the CEO. That's 49% of all marketers fall into that category. So, we look at it from a numbers perspective. Across the board, only 3/4 of CEOs feel that their CMO is actually delivering on the growth agenda. So there's a long way to go.
Let's talk about the CFO relationship, because to that person, the number cruncher, that relationship is often a sort of rather tense relationship where they're looking at return on investment in literal numeric figures. Where do you think that is heading?
So if the CEO is the biggest advocate of the CMO, then the CFO is the biggest critic. And we found that only 50% of CFOs believe that marketers are delivering on the growth agenda. And even worse, only 40% are willing to protect marketing budgets in a time of downturn or in budget cuts. So there's a lot of work still to be done with the CFO relationship and the CMO.
Isn't that counter-logical? We've seen so many times before when there's been a downturn, the people who recover quicker tend to be the ones that invested in their brand and kept their brand relevant.
Absolutely. In fact, research that we have has shown that companies that invest in growth during a downturn are more resilient and come out stronger on the tail end. But again, we're finding that the CFO-CMO relationship, in a lot of cases it's great, but in enough cases, again, 50% of the time, the business case that's being made by marketing is just not enough to convince a CFO to not cut the budgets in cost-cutting initiatives.
There has been a criticism of CMOs that they have their own little language that they kind of keep to themselves, and they need to be encouraged to speak exactly the same language as the rest of the enterprise. Are they learning to do that, or are they still seeming isolated?
We find that the unifier CMO is most likely to speak the language of the C-suite they describe. So they don't think in terms of marketing metrics or insights. They're not thinking about brand awareness or customer sentiment analysis. They're actually communicating, what does this mean for the top line? What does this mean for business performance? What does this mean in terms of profit and loss? What does this mean in terms of the balance sheet? So unifier CMOs are more and more successful at communicating in a language that the rest of the C-suite understands.
But how important is that relationship with the less obvious C-suite, whether it's human resources, whether it's the good old chief digital officer, where in places like L'Oreal it's the CDO that has the kind of top job?
Well, let's look at the chief HR officer, as you noted, because ironically it's actually the most strained relationship. Maybe not strained, it's the one with the least symbiosis. And it's not because the CMO and the CHRO have radically different views or butt heads. It's just because they literally don't proactively spend the time together. So typically what happens is at the 11th hour, the tail end of a massive transformation, the CHRO has to now execute on a strategy as opposed to proactively saying, how are we going to create a new culture, new job families, new recruiting tactics, new people strategies for retention to proactively actually build that culture. That's a relationship, actually that's the single relationship that needs to be built that doesn't exist today, even at the unifier CMO.
who's responsible for improving this situation? Is it the kind of CMO being a bit more of a tub thumper and making sure that they are recognised as the driver of growth within a business, a more operational role? Or does the CEO, again I'll pick on L'Oreal, who really kind of anoints that person with the power to sort of drive the business?
I don't know the specifics of the L'Oreal case, but if I think about it, there's almost universal agreement within the C-suite and the board that marketing and CMO should drive the growth agenda and should drive the performance of the organization. And I think that CMOs we call the unifier CMOs, they can either be born or made within the organization. So the preconditions might already be in place. So there might be already a culture of bringing the CMO and giving them a seat at the table. There might be a culture of working closely with the chief HR officer and the chief technology officer. So in those cases, it's really easy to bring a CMO up into the organization. In other cases, we see this CMO coming in as a change agent and actually creating this new culture, creating the new infrastructure.
But if they're not put on the kind of the boardroom table, are their hands slightly tied in terms of transforming a business?
I wouldn't look at it as boardroom. Let's look at it as operating committee, right? So, at the end of the day, the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the CMO, they need to be peers and they need to collectively own the growth agenda, which is orchestrated and convened by the CMO, right? And, it's that interrelationship and symbiosis which is actually what drives real growth at the organization.
Jason, Biljana, thanks for your insight. Hi, I'm James Wright and thanks for watching Marketing Media Money. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thanks for watching.